Season 2 of the Strange, Rare, and Peculiar podcast, a place to learn more about homeopathy, deepening your knowledge, expanding your universe of possibility in the world of health and well-being through homeopathy.
Homeo what?
Homeo what?
Hello, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
That was a little strange. Hello.
My voice is a little different, isn't it?
It is different, and the hacking, all the hacking and the coughing.
I'm going to try and remove any hacking that occurs.
You're going to edit your hacks?
I'm going to edit the hack. Yeah, I've got a little, what do you call it? Upper respiratory tract infection.
Mm-hmm. And you're so good with letting a homeopath know how your symptoms are so that they can help you.
Well,
I've given up.
No, don't give up. It's
don't give up on me, baby.
Sometimes it's not that easy actually locating what the symptoms might be. That's just an excuse. You've already slurped. By the way, folks, that was not me slurping.
Did I actually make a slurp sound?
Oh, yeah, you totally did.
I did not. This is a really nice cup of tea with Manuka honey.
Speaking of tea, Manuka honey, New Zealand honey, huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah. 100
whatever factor.
Yeah, right. Do you remember that cup of tea in Central Otago?
Oh my gosh, this is the best. We were in New Zealand. We were coming back from Wanaka, which is this beautiful mountain town with a lake. It's one of those places that doesn't even look real. And we get to go there pretty much every year.
Going in 2 months.
We'll be there in 2 months. Anyway, it's absolutely stunning. And we're coming back with Alastair's family, and we stop for lunch.
At the Big Fruit.
And by the Big Fruit, for anyone who has been that way. These giant, it's a giant set. It's like a set of fruit sculptures on sticks, and each individual fruit is probably 15 feet tall.
More.
Right? More.
By the way, we're talking about Cromwell, if you know the parts.
Yeah. Anyway, so we go into this cafe where we always stop for lunch on the way back, and I ordered a cup of tea and I asked for some honey, and they looked at me like, what?
Like you had 3 heads.
At least 3. And I said, honey. And then this person she seemed concerned at the request, and she came back, and there was must have used an ice cream scooper and put a dollop of honey, but it was like the size of a golf ball, and which would have been
more than that. It was a bigger. It was a cricket ball.
It was huge. Anyway, it wasn't as big as a cricket ball. Anyway, but which would have seemed just like a very generous offering, except that she looked at me when she delivered it and she said, would that be enough? I thought,
isn't that so polite?
We're going to have a diabetic coma. I mean, it was just, it was, yeah.
It's so interesting because honey in tea is not unheard of, but definitely in those parts.
Apparently.
There's a funny story about New Zealand it's a Monty Python book, so it's not a skit or in a movie, but John Cleese is talking about what it was like to travel the world. Yeah. At doing Monty Python, and there's a story where I think you know the place because it's there used to be a train that went from Christchurch to Picton through Kaikoura. Oh, and yes. It was an overnight. Yeah, and they've obviously done a gig in Christchurch, and they're heading north to go to Wellington, presumably. So this is maybe early 70s, and he asked for a 2-egg omelette on the train, and what he got was an omelette with a fried egg on top. Oh,
oh my gosh!
Yeah,
that's great. That's a bonus.
How about that?
Yeah, put an egg on it.
Hilarious.
That is really funny.
Yeah.
Okay, but we're not here to talk about a New Zealand travelog.
No, indeed
we are not.
We're reflecting on our first 4 weeks, really.
Yeah, first 4 weeks of school, and the reflections are about not sort of our own personal experience, obviously, but what are the trends? Like every year, starting an academic year, it's a fresh start. It's, there are new people coming on, and for those of you who might not know about the Academy of Homeopathy Education, our program, we run full-time and part-time programs. The average person takes like 3 years to finish the part-time program with all the clinical, finishing all the clinical competencies, and about 4 years to do it in part-time. So we get to know people. They're around for a while. So then when new people come in, it's, it changes, the dynamic changes. And also
each class has a flavor.
Each cohort, they really do.
Each year has a different flavor.
Yeah. And I mean, this year it's just great. It's really lovely.
It's amazing, actually.
Yeah, it really is. But clinic, there are also trends that happen with the clients that come through the clinic.
Right. And so the flavor in the classroom is often dictated by what spontaneously happens in the clinical part of the program.
Right, and also how people are finding their way to us.
Isn't it mostly kids and men so far in chronic clinic in the last 4 weeks?
Oh. Well, no, I mean, there have been some, but you're right. It has been mostly kids and men. Yeah. How about that?
Yeah.
But this year, well, we often have a lot of transfer students. I don't know what the percentage is this year, but it feels like a fair amount. And we often get people who have not just transferred and sort of come in laterally from where they were in their other program, but people who start over, which makes for a really interesting year one cohort dynamic, because there are people coming from, lots of different places, lots of different levels. And now that there is so much sort of personal study, it's also a little different, isn't it?
So I see where you're going. It's almost as if it's pretty rare to have someone in first year, day one, or, end of the first month, that has not studied in some form, somewhere, someplace, somewhere, somehow.
I almost started singing with you, but I didn't.
It's a good thing we didn't. Although, can I just say that you introduced me to West Side Story?
I cannot believe that you made it through.
How old am I?
I'm not. It's not my job to tell you, but as of next Wednesday, you will be a year older.
But I loved it. It was a TV version.
West Side Story, so good.
The 50s version, or the early 61, I think it was.
Yeah.
Anyway,
oh my gosh, Rita Moreno.
Sorry, we're distracted somehow. But what you're saying, I think, is that it feels like the classroom in day one homeopathy school used to be even. Yeah. Everyone came in going, I'm new. Mm-hmm. And
or at least new-ish. There would be the difference were the people who had done a little study or had seen a homeopath for a long time and had all this experience.
Yeah, or read half a book or something like that.
But now, my goodness.
Well, it is interesting because, we've got folks that do, start again. And I think, I have to say, that's probably the most ideal, even though sometimes the material that they might be doing is being heard for a second or third time. But definitely the better outcomes come from beginning.
I started over 3 times. Or I started from the beginning 3 times. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Moving from school to school.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that's an observation. I don't think we're not. Are you saying that there's anything which has gone on, which is
no? It's what I've
concerning?
Been. Sorry, no, not concerning at all. It's just been interesting in reflecting on how. Okay, the point I wanted to make was that it really points out how different people talk about homeopathy. Differently. Sorry. Yes. Thank you. Adverb.
That's right.
And that
grammar police.
Oh, please. Don't even get me started. How do you spell principal, Alastair? Anyway, that it really points out the differences in schools and just ways of thinking about homeopathy. And one of the things that we try to do in the beginning of the program is kind of start everybody at the beginning so that we develop consistent language and try not to be sloppy with our language so that we can all move forward as a group. It like creates cohesion in the group. Yeah. So that I sort of like being reminded of that because I think for the most part, even though there are people who come in with experience, I mean, we have people who come with 20 years experience, whatever. There's a humility that not everybody, but most people bring to the classroom that I really appreciate, you know, because even if you know the material, like I feel like as someone who's taught the curriculum so many times through, I learn something new every time. It makes you more humble. It's sort of bigger than you could.
It makes you more humble.
Yeah.
It doesn't make everybody more humble.
Oh, but I think
every teacher more humble.
Oh, not every teacher. Well, no, probably not.
No, definitely not.
No. Some people have a little guru thing.
Or a big guru thing.
Or a big one. Yeah, I don't have that so much.
No, you don't.
I would be so afraid. Could you imagine me being somebody's guru? It would be ridiculous, actually. I'm just not the type. I don't want one, and I don't want to be one.
Yeah.
But the humility, though, I think a lot of students, there is a way in which watching people who you know have learned something still find a really good question to ask about it to clarify the knowledge.
Well, a question from a student in a classroom is a learning opportunity, is a learning leap.
I love the conversations and questions. Yep.
Yeah. You know, every now and again they're not so learning leaps because they can be, oh, look at me, this is what I know, or this is what I'm kind of disagreeing with you about. So not all questions are interruptions that way oriented. But for the most part they are, and I think they're to be celebrated.
Totally. I mean, it has been, gosh, I'm because I taught so many classes this week. This week has been a bear. This week has been a bear. I can't remember which one was which, but there were two particular classes. I think it might have been the Tuesday and Wednesday night groups that had the most amazing questions. Yeah, you know what? Actually, I'm sure of it now because, our part-time students, they come live every week for a session and then they have a recorded, sort of tutor-guided session. And so they get an extra half hour to talk about it. And so there's always time we have, a half hour set aside for questions. And there were amazing questions from the material that they were looking at, in particular in semester 4, because they are at the point where they are studying complex case management and long-term case management. And actually, this is different than where I thought I was going with this. It's a little different than we talked about when we were planning, but I mean, why should that be any different? Right, planning. But what really struck me was that, so we have this time for them to ask questions in class, which we did, and then we also have a fireside chat every week. And so that was just yesterday, wasn't it? Yeah, we set aside an hour for community conversation, and it's open to anyone, and it's often fun because it's lighthearted. There's no set agenda. I mean, sometimes there is, but for the most part, there's not. And it's a chance to bring questions about anything, really. And I'm watching the advanced students as they are grappling with these long-term case management questions. And you can see, they turn up at Fireside and they ask these really nuanced, they're little tiny nuanced things that that they're getting it because they're seeing they're not trying to make a recipe out of it. If this, do that, but rather we've gotten them to the point, or they themselves have come to the point, I should say, given the curriculum that we offer, they've come to the point where in recognition of each long-term case management decision being a multifactorial one, that they can ask those questions without being upset that you can't give them an answer, but rather a set of parameters. My gosh. Did that even make sense at the end? I exhausted myself.
I mean, you were speaking code. Give me an example.
That was like a Hahnemannian aphorism from, 1810.
No, you did all right. I know what you're talking about. So, but give an example. If you can.
So actually, I'll give an example of someone who, okay, I'm actually going to give an example from clinic. So we had a number of clinics this week. So AHE clinic, my gosh, if we were to count up how many hours of clinic were offered this week, it's a lot, because we have our acute clinic.
That was me.
Yeah, you had acute clinic. So that's where live clients with acute issues come. By the way, send everybody, homeopathyhelpnow.com.
Yep.
So there's that. Then there are the follow-ups. So that's in the chronic clinic. I don't know how many follow-ups we did. And then there's chronic clinic, a new case. And so we had a follow-up where it was a case of a child, and there were basically 3 different roads we could go down. We could continue the same remedy, but deliver it in a different way.
Yep.
In terms of frequency, we could change the potency, or we could change to a different remedy.
Wow.
And it was
all legit,
all totally legitimate.
Oh.
And the reason that those were legitimate was you can do that because this is what we would say an otherwise healthy kid. Right? And so the robust conversation that came from that is, what's the difference between an otherwise healthy kid and a situation where you don't have 3 roads you can go down, and you've got to make sure that you're at the point where you should change the remedy because the stakes are much higher. So a question that came up after clinic was a newer student asking a really nuanced question about case management in PANS and PANDAS cases, because I used that as an example. I said, well, we can have this conversation right now where there are 3 different avenues to go, because this child happens to be pretty healthy, pretty robust, and you're not going to knock him. He's not going to get knocked off kilter, and the complaints are minimal. Everything around him is really good, right? Family, good food, all the things, right?
Yep. But
when you've got a case of, a neuro case, if we're talking PANS and PANDAS, those cases, like you have to get so in the weeds to make the decision about whether or not to change the remedy or the potency, and the level of scrutiny at each case management decision in the long term is so, it can be really almost fraught. And I was saying, I have, I think 4 cases sitting in my inbox for more than 3 days, which I really rarely do. I like to hit inbox 0 in the client department, but they're really nuanced, and I need 20 minutes for each of them to make sure that that I'm understanding everything before doing that. And anyway, this is really important because this is how we become clinically competent, right? And this is where, in developing a program, we often talk about how can someone really truly learn to be a successful homeopath with the nuances of long-term case management without sitting in the clinic classroom hashing it out over and over.
Totally. I like what you're saying. It's really, it's a bit random, isn't it? Because if we offer, say, chronic clinic this week and then next week, but the case next week is going to be menopausal, somebody.
Yeah.
And the case the week after that is going to be a 3-year-old, and the case after that is going to be a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
And you've only landed on, say, next week's, infant. And the case that was full of nuance and case management gems and really stretching. What I'm saying is it's random when a student lands in a clinic, which is where the rubber hits the road and where you start to apply your philosophical foundations
but every conversation though is there's so much that comes out of each conversation. So even though somebody might not have seen the initial case, they can come to the follow-up and hear, because in my opinion that's the most important part is the long-term case management, isn't it? Yeah.
I've got a story.
Oh, good! I love your stories.
Well, it's not a classic story, but it's from this week's clinic. It was an acute case.
Yeah.
And It was a woman who had a upper respiratory tract infection, not too dissimilar to myself. And she was talking, and I had about 20 minutes when things were closing down, and I think we'd even got the MyCore data.
That's our outcome survey.
She said, when I was here last. And I went, oh, interesting. And I went, okay, hang on, think, how do you find the case file of a client in front of you that was here previously? I actually wrote to Elizabeth.
In the moment?
In the moment. And then I realised it'll be in Slack.
Yeah.
And so I found it.
Wow.
And, you know, the conversation was winding down, so it was appropriate, and I was focused, just in case you were wondering.
Yeah.
And
because, afterward I would say, what were you doing during clinic?
And I was looking at, but it was so interesting because I'd done a quick classification, just on my own.
Yeah.
Done a quick repertorization on my own, and one remedy sticking out, and I was thinking, it's not really that common for an upper respiratory tract infection, and then I found her file. Scrolled down, there it was.
That's what she had gotten before.
Previously, Calicarb.
Yeah.
Boom. And she said something like in her first follow-up, thank you and thank the Lord. The medicine you do is, the former mention you do is amazing. She had a brilliant response to Calicarbonicum.
Wait, you think of that as an unusual upper respiratory remedy?
No. I just wasn't thinking about it.
Okay. I was going to say.
No, what I meant was, given the symptoms. Given the general symptoms she was talking about. So it was just really lovely to see congruence between a well-taken case now leading to this remedy, and then complete validation from the type of acute that she had, last time, 6 months ago, whatever it was. I was also, I have to say, impressive record keeping, and just the ability to quickly check. Yeah. It was
so
nice.
This is another thing. So this week we recorded a video about the research office. And I know a previously recorded podcast talks all about the things we were doing in the research office. But one of the things that we emphasized in this recording that we did that's going to be presented at a research conference next week was about how the importance of the infrastructure in the way that all of our stuff is set up. And I was talking about the vertical integration from intake to peer review publication, that there's this entire system. And that is something that I think, and maybe it's just my own pathology that I sort of need things organized. And that's just, I like to find all the other people that help, that are participating in our organization that are doing it that way. We have an unusual number of Capricorns in our organization. It's just good. Anyway, but I think about this in terms of students and their learning, right? So another thing that has been coming up is, so you've heard us say Slack, and if you're not familiar with Slack, it's a workplace communications tool. It's sort of like group text threads. You can DM with it, but you can also create group text threads, and we use it to the max for our organization. It's kind of amazing. Anyway, we have a group. Every cohort has a Slack thread, and the faculty, we are on it so that we can help the students along the way. It's mostly Andrea, our academic manager, who engages in those conversations, but we get to see all of the questions that students are asking. And what's interesting is that for newer students, so much about the first month of learning is how do I study in this particular learning environment? They're learning to use all the tools, and they're learning to, take notes as an adult learner. They had a class on, academic integrity and literacy, and, all of those kinds of, like the nuts and bolts things that go along with it. And it's funny because that happens in the beginning. It's like a big push in the beginning, and then it doesn't happen much anymore. It's like the first, what do you think, 3 months it takes until people really get their groove, and then...
I would say so, yeah. I think I like that term, study groove. I think folks get it on
Right.
Early on.
So, like, if you're a person who's listening to this podcast and you're thinking, well, I'm interested in studying homeopathy, or maybe you're a student or a practitioner, it's funny how I'm always amazed at how many other skills it takes to do good homeopathy, right? So part of being a good practitioner is also good record keeping, like you said. You found that being able to search through Slack for an acute was really important. Same goes with how we teach our students to set up a chart so that you have a table of contents, for example, that takes you from the place in the chart to exactly where that consultation was, and you can see all of your notes. That information management is a huge part of being a homeopath, weirdly so.
Well, it is. I have to say, I'm kind of astonished. It took probably for me 30 years to realize that the general skill of managing information is at the core of what we do.
Oh my gosh, it literally took you 30 years. See, this, it makes sense.
Actually, yeah.
Because you said to me once, you know where all your stuff is. You were surprised that I could find a lecture, like my lecture notes, so quickly. And I was like, how did you think I was able to manage?
Well, you don't have a structure, a tree structure for all of your documents like I do.
What are you talking about? Yes, I do.
Well, exactly, but it's kind of hidden and schmood, and
no,
I just
made
up a word.
But it's not.
Well, no, but it is because...
How can you even...
because I look over your shoulder and see your desktop. And so much of the stuff you do seems to be on your desktop.
No, not
anyway,
my lecture
surprise,
notes. Not my lecture notes.
Yeah. But my surprise was that wasn't so obvious. No, you're a super organized person.
Yeah. But that's information management, important for being
critical.
a homeopath. Really critical.
And one of the things which gets me, I mean, if we're just going to talk about that for a minute, because I think, that's a focus of one lecture. I mean, if we're 4 weeks in and we're thinking, say, part-time, that means there's been 4 lectures.
Yeah.
But one of them has been about information management.
Right.
As a critical attribute and skill that you need to start developing right now. You want to flex that muscle. And, that's how much emphasis we place on it.
Totally. And it's not just because you have to be organized so that you bill people and, come to your appointment when you need to. But the information management is a critical part of long-term case management because, right? Because if you are 3 months in, okay, it's not that hard to find all the information about a client, but 3 years in or 13 years in or 23 years in.
Have you got some cases from 23 years?
I would say I have cases. I have people from the early 2000s.
So that's, for me, those cases are about 120, I was going to say A4, but US letter pages.
Yeah.
The files are that big.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Excuse me.
And so having them in such a way that you can find, so that you can trace the information, so that you can find the logical thread for the long-term case management is really critical. And I think we kind of forget that. And it's funny because, you think about it now, we use computers to manage all of that. But I had my quirky systems because I only switched to digital note-taking in 15? 15 or 16. You talked me into it so that I would stop traveling with so many folders. It was sort of...
No, it was because you travel with folders. That's fine. I don't care, except you want me to lift them. That's the challenge.
Oh my gosh. Then I started that ridiculous interim period of scanning every page of my chart. It was just ridiculous. But I would be able to find things, but I had...
Downstairs, in the basement, I have... about 10 years worth of... It's not 10. It's about 6 busy years worth of paper files that I need to scan.
Oh yeah, I have all the folders. But those back in the day, doing things on paper, I used to use little tabs and stickies, and and had like a manual table of contents with page numbers so I could find it.
And with long-term cases, you needed multiple manila folders, color scheme. I mean, Staples in the Container Store,
Wow.
We love those places.
So I guess, this is sort of a funny odd conversation because it's really about, how reflections on how things that come up in thinking about what it means to be a homeopath that you learn from being in a community where there are new learners always coming in, and you learn from them and the things that are really important. It's like a reminder every year.
Yeah, it is.
Isn't it?
I mean, the toughest thing, because my reflection is similar and a little different, because there's two things that I see students wrestling with. We've got adult learners, universally, and that means they're extremely competent in some aspects of their lives, and quite often brilliant in some aspects of their lives.
Totally.
And then they arrive in a classroom, and then they're just not.
Well, it's not that they're not, it's that it's something new.
Yeah, well, they're just not. They're new at something. And this, by the way...
That sound is outpouring me a little, whatever was left in the teapot.
I want you to put your finger on the top.
On the top? Oh, on the lid? No, that's enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, imagine that you're running a department, or you are... the head of HR, or that you are a really, really competent massage practitioner, and then you want to augment your skills and you go to homeopathy school, but you're in day one. And that is a big, big challenge for folks. And I think they react to it in all sorts of different ways.
Oh my gosh. The hardest thing is, I think, for all of the really smart and competent people when they are new in the clinical situation. And we say to them, okay, if you're in your first semester, we want you to just listen.
Yeah.
We do our clinic, just so if you're not familiar with AHE's clinic. So we have big groups in the clinic day, and then everybody watches the case together, and then we divide into groups. So the beginner students are with one teacher, and then the more advanced students are working with another teacher. And the beginner students are trying to get to the end before they've understood the beginning.
Which is natural.
Yeah,
which is
totally.
Entirely natural.
But applying skills that they have from other parts of their life.
Yeah.
And the one that comes up most frequently, actually there are two. One is sort of psychoanalysis, right? Because we're used to managing our life through how we manage our relationships or how we observe other people. And so all of the sort of self-help language and psychology language and whatever, but it comes into precedence as people are trying to grapple with cases, especially if they believe that so much of homeopathy is about unraveling somebody's, mental and emotional state as a priority.
They may have come across an idea like that or formulated that idea, because the two are, in a way, parallel, but totally different.
Yeah.
But that's not quite what I meant. So just going back to what I was saying, because I think I totally agree with you. But for me, it's happened a number of times in my life. It happened kind of 3 times for me. Once in 2006 when I went and did my master's.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I'd been in practice kind of 15 years about that time. And I would have quietly, never said it out loud, but quietly thought, really, what are you going to teach me? Oh my God, the smack on the side of the head that I got from that process.
Yeah.
And realizing very quickly that my critical reflection and valuation skills were shabby, and realizing that I had a lot to learn. That was awful and magic for me. And then soon after that, because I got my job at Endeavour on the back of that qualification. And I remember being in a meeting with this, I'll be frank.
You told this story.
This old lady, I'm not sure. What story have I told you?
Oh, go ahead. No, you keep going.
So, I'm in a meeting with a couple of other heads of department.
Yeah.
And this purple hair, blue rinsed, elderly woman who was annoying. That's what I'm experiencing
Blue
at the moment.
rinse.
And she said to everybody, okay, you've all got, your 34 subjects. I'm going to be expecting your marking rubrics to all be in. And I said, you what? And she said, the marking rubrics. And I said, no, a rubric is a symptom in homeopathic materia medica. And she looked at me and she said, I have no idea who you are, and I don't care. That's what a rubric is.
Oh my gosh.
And she pointed her finger, and then she moved on. And have I told that story before?
No.
Different story.
A different story, yeah.
I don't know that I've mentioned that to you, but I like in terms of being schooled.
Yeah.
And in a context of a broader tertiary education environment, that happened to me 25 times. Oh my God.
Because I think I've heard like 20 of the others,
Yeah,
but
right.
I guess I didn't realize there were so many.
But anyway, the point that I'm making is that in my world where, you're a medium-sized fish, you're not in others. And just to begin again in a different environment, it's tough.
It's totally
And so that's
tough.
what I'm saying. That's just observing that. And there's a degree of kind of just, like not fighting that. Not fighting that you're a student and trusting. So not only have you got to float, but you've got to trust that we've got you.
Yeah.
And I think there's, that takes a lot to let go when you're a seriously confident adult in the world. Families and mortgages and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And then, here we're going, well, actually, no.
Yeah.
I
find that really hard because in clinic, it's, you kind of have to guide people. And sometimes if people go too far down the wrong road, it's like, no, you must know. And it's tough to hold that line.
Yeah, but I hear you sometimes, if I'm eavesdropping, pretty gently just saying, no, if this was NLP school or if this was Gestalt therapy school, then but no, we're teaching homeopathy here.
Yeah. But it's hard, right? Because you're applying those skills. I think it's actually hardest for the medically licensed folks.
Very difficult.
We've had some great conversations this week about how do we use the medical information that we have in the homeopathic analysis, and how sometimes, how you have to know and hold all the data that you have, and you cannot let it overly inform your clinical decision-making unless you have to.
Well, it has a critical importance in a starting place to begin the conversation, but it has a super critical role in case management as an obstacle. Yeah,
or as knowing what the risks are or knowing what complications are.
Yeah, to be wary of, the things to be wary of.
It was funny because we all of the cases, all the clients submit a health inventory form, and I made a decision some time ago to not distribute that health inventory form to all of the students, but just to read it. All the care team has it, but not everyone. And part of it is that I found that many of the students would get locked into what was on the form, and it would keep them from being able to listen to what the client was saying. And so it was interesting. This past week, there was one of the clients that we saw had a medical diagnosis. And I, instead of saying what the name of the condition was, I just said what the condition was about. Yeah, I'm not going into detail to respect the privacy of the person. Anyway, so students asked, well, so you said it was these symptoms. So is it this diagnosis or this one? And I said, don't worry about it. Well, you have to know. And then somebody got a little bit worked up about it, and then was sort of schooling me on why it was important and how it would be, I can't remember the word that they used, something like, not unethical, but irresponsible. And I have to acknowledge that I got a little panty in a bunch because
Panty in a bunch.
A little bit. The verb to panty in a bunch. Because I said, do you actually think I would be irresponsible with, 60 students in the room? I could have had a better moment. But I think it's really interesting because that idea that we try in homeopathy to separate the clinical diagnosis, or no, let me say it differently, to extract only what is necessary in our knowledge of the clinical diagnosis or named condition or anticipated symptom picture or progression from the client's experience. I took a case this morning of a young woman with rapid and severe onset of a neurodegenerative condition, and it's a lot. It's a tough one, but her case, and how much of my practice is in neurological stuff, like a lot. Her condition is different from any that I've ever seen in its presentation. That's a great lesson. despite the fact of having treated someone with her diagnosis, I don't know how many times, her individual experience, totally different, right? That is hard. It's hard. I think it's hard to teach. It's hard to be consistent within our own practices, in our own lives. I mean, I think about if a family member is telling me that they are not well, I want to know what's wrong with them. Well, if they, did you get labs done? What did your lab say? What is this? What is that? Because that is the language of, 2 centuries of as much diagnosis and diagnostic criteria and how we fit into the parameters deemed to be, safe and good, right? And that's what we do in our regular lives and conversations. But when we get into the homeopath's chair, our work is a combo of those things, isn't it? And actually, we're finally getting to the thing we talking about, right? Which is one of the questions that has come up a lot is the advanced students are, as we said, dealing with long-term case management, and we deal with a whole bunch of different topics in long-term case management, like, long-term case management in people with addiction issues or who are taking a lot of suppressive drugs, or what are some of the other ones?
Recreational drugs, anxiety.
Right, neurological. I do the neurological
compliance,
one. Yep.
Elderly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so as we're having the conversations about this, because you sort of got to noodle it out, the students are grappling with how sometimes we're focused on a very small pathological piece of a case, and other times we are looking at the global totality. And when I say global totality, it's like the whole big picture, the whole everything you can imagine. And that you sometimes are moving through those analytical frameworks over the course of time. And this is, when I think about how homeopathy has evolved and how right now we have this real polarity in the field where you have one group of people that is looking at sort of homeopathy through the lens of like a psychodynamic evolutionary process, right? A lot of these systems, like the mapping systems and so forth, that and which bypass a lot of the very minute pathological inferences that drive a prescription, right? It's more sort of archetypal.
Totally.
It's more of a gestalt, right? And then you've got on the other side, the blowback from that is practical homeopathy protocols, right? There's a reason why so many people are leaning into that, because there's a lot of homeopathy that leans away from the treatment of the presenting complaint. And a case that we had this week that was, oh my gosh, it was like a great teaching tool, was that cases can tell us several stories. You can have your simple language, big picture, archetypal, gestalt type of case. You can have a very pathological case at the same time. And you need to figure out the appropriate way to make a clinical move. You need to understand both, right? Like anything, the middle of the road, you need to stand in the middle to be able to see both sides. Right?
I completely, yep, I agree.
We don't have anything to say about that?
Oh.
You're just listening so intently. I thought you'd have an answer.
No, I think that where you landed just then is my own journey.
Yeah.
Actually, my own journey going from those two extremes that you just mentioned.
Right.
And I would have hoped that as I went through my own clinical journey, spending I came from a Kentian school, focused on big picture, and I am totally interested in psychodynamics because they are important, and focusing on that. And then I spent lots and lots of years at the smaller end, the smaller constricted totality of things.
Right. I remember when I first met you, that's when you were kind of telling that story in a lot of your lectures around what it was like to move to Australia, and you would give examples of asking people these big questions, and Australian men saying to you, like, bloke, I got, whatever.
What would they say? Are you a dickhead? That's what they would say.
No.
Okay.
Do we have to? No, we have to beep you twice.
Beep beep. No, it's okay because that's not in terms of bad words. That's at the lower end of the spectrum. Depends on where you come from.
Yeah.
But so that's my historical journey, and so the middle path for me is a really important one. Now you were talking about Capricorns before.
Yeah.
So as a Libran,
Yeah.
it is totally legit. It's a safe place to be.
Sure. Right.
In the middle of the road, or at least looking for that third way. And there's always a third way.
Yeah.
It's you know the story, the great Olympic story of. God, what's his name? Steve. It'll come to me in a minute.
What sport?
Ice racing.
Gosh.
Speed skating.
Yeah.
It's a Winter Olympic. I'm going to tell a story.
Oh, good.
So in the speed skating, it's got to be, I think, I'm going to say...
Oh, was he an American?
2006. No, he was an Aussie.
Oh.
And he's... geez, the name escapes me. Someone help me. But it's
Speed skating in Australia. It's so hot.
Well, not when you're inside and there's an ice rink.
I know.
But you know what I'm talking about.
It's like the Jamaican bobsledders.
Very quick.
Yeah, and they're bent forward. And,
that one, yeah. And they've got the hats on. Yeah. And...
You're so animated. Maybe this is a sport that you have not... Thing. Is this a sport you should have really...
No, definitely not. Okay. No, my thighs are not developed enough for that kind of action. But it's the quarterfinal, and so they go around maybe about 16 times, and who's ever first over the line, you go to the next round. 1, 2, probably the first 2 go through. And it's the quarterfinal, and they hit the last turn.
Yeah.
And the Japanese guy's in front, and the Korean guy's next, and the American guy's next, and about 10 lengths back is the Aussie guy. Not very good.
Yeah. And
they all take each other out on the final turn, and he sails through, wins the quarterfinal. He's in the semi-final.
Oh.
All right.
Okay.
So exactly the same thing happened in the semi-final, where he is dead last. Like by a long way.
Yeah.
And because of the tight nature of the circuit, the Korean guy, the Russian guy, and the Norwegian guy wipe out. He sails through, wins the semi-final.
You've told this story before.
It's the most extraordinary sporting event because he's now in the final with the giant, I'm going to make it up, Finnish guy, the Danish guy, and the Canadian guy, and him, right? And I wish I could remember his name because it's turned into a verb,
Yeah.
And the point, and guess what happened?
What?
Same thing. On the last turn, they've gone around 15 times. On the last turn, heading for home, he is well behind, and they all take each other out, and he sails through. The look on his face, because he knows he's the worst skater, and the look on his face is astronomical, and he puts his hands up like this. It's a brilliant photo.
It's a miracle.
It's a Christmas miracle.
Oh my gosh.
And it's one of the great sporting moments. Anyway, there's always a third way because sometimes my story is only loosely attached to actually the point that I was trying to make, which is when you think, and it's just the same in life.
If you asked me to spend the entire day trying to figure out the point that you were making, I would not be able to.
Well, I'm about to make it.
I'm really excited that you are. You're saving me a lot of time.
Because when people are going, oh, should I do that one, or should I go with this place or that place, or do I dye my hair green or blue? There's always the true way is usually the third way, in the middle path.
What does that have to do with the speed skaters?
Because it's just the thing that emerges usually from the back.
I see.
So
alrighty then.
Yeah. No, so the third way or the middle path.
Yeah.
Is where I find myself spending all my time.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. And in my clinical work, every now and again I head a little bit over this way. That great question in Fireside Chat yesterday. Who was it? It was Leslie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, she just said, can you give some examples of where you constrict your totality?
Right.
And I can remember them.
Totally.
But I don't do it most of the time. I do it in complex, chronic cases after whatever I've tried usually has not worked.
Yeah.
First, second, third.
Well, that was more tautopathic intervention because a constricted totality can happen at any point.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
But that is really key. And that's, that is something I'm so glad
Bradbury.
that... What?
Stephen Bradbury.
Oh.
It's called a Bradbury.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I want to see the video of it.
Oh, look.
Have you ever seen the video of Ben? So my youngest did.
Of him throwing the javelin?
No, that one's really good. This was the one where he was. My kids did Tae-Soo-Do. It's a Korean martial art, and Ben was really good. So they put him in with the big kids, but he was little, so he would have been, say, 5. No, he would have been 6, and like a little sprightly thing in with these in the group competition that went up to like 12-year-olds, and we were at a competition. And it's him, and it's a sparring competition, so they're wearing all the, the padded gear and everything. And he was the littlest, and he got paired because it's a random thing with the biggest kid. Yeah. And he won because each time he would catch the kid by surprise, he would jump up and bonk him on the head. Yeah. But he had to jump like 1.5 feet off the ground. Yeah. And by the third time, you can hear in the background, the crowd is just crying. And the person who's filming it, you could see the camera's jumping because he's laughing so hard. Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of that a little bit.
It's not too far off. I think actually I have seen that video, but the thing which is most the striking is you screaming from the bleachers.
I'm an Italian mother,
Italian moms and their kids.
So what was this podcast about?
This podcast has just been about our reflections for the first 4 weeks.
Uh-huh.
And everything that's been said has been on target and completely logical.
Right. Good.
Well, there you go.
And were there takeaways for people? Middle path.
Yeah, middle path. Be okay if you're in school. We got you. Trust the process.
Yeah.
And be a beginner. And just it's okay to be a beginner.
I love the idea of being a beginner.
Well, you're going to be a beginner soon.
I am?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
PhD.
Oh, I was... Well, I have to find a program first. I have to find a supervisor first.
Yeah.
Willing to work with an old person. Apparently, if you are of a certain age, which in...
Of a certain age,
which in the Academy is over 45. People over 40.
Yeah, you are of somewhat lesser value to a department of something if you're over the age of 45.
And usually don't qualify for funding. But yeah, I hope to be able to do that.
Let's all put out some vibes to the universe to bring forth that supervisor.
Right, thank you.
No worries.
And what are we going to talk about next time?
There are 284 questions that have come through. Maybe question time, but we're not going to be around next Friday.
We are going to be at a conference next Friday, the Geary Conference.
Well, I say the Geary.
AIH, you say Geary?
Yeah, but Geary.
This is a research conference, and we are really fortunate that we have been able to submit an abstract and a 15-minute video about our research office and what we have been up to. Anyway, all right, everybody, take care. Have a good one.
See you later.
The Academy of Homeopathy Education offers clinical training that far exceeds the requirements put forth by the Council of Homeopathic Certification and ACHINA. Unlike other programs that give credit for paper or pre-recorded video cases, AHE has built a thriving telehealth clinic with clients of all ages and from all walks of life to give a diverse clinical experience that addresses the most prevalent 21st century health challenges. Standalone clinical training packages are available for qualified practitioners. Learn more at ahe.online.